and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and at the back end of last week's podcast, we both said the pressure was on Michael Carrick and this group of players, and the pressure was on, and they've failed to deliver. 2 defeats, that makes it 4 defeats on the bounce, and well, the pressure, if it wasn't already on, is certainly on Michael Carrick and the players right now. Nathan, we are recording this just hours after we've just been beaten 1-0 off Watford, so emotions are high, frustrations are very clear. A bit of apathy set in on my behalf, but we can get into that. How are you feeling? Because I know you probably just want to get this over and done with, and kind of, like myself, I almost want to bury my head in the sand a little bit and just pretend this isn't happening, that we aren't currently sat 11th in the table, but here we are, and it seems like one way or another we're going to have to kind of spark this season back into life somehow.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure where the answers are for the questions which lie at the foot of Michael Carrick at this moment in time. As you mentioned, 4 defeats on the bounce, 3 wins in the last 14 league games, 1 win in the last 6 with 5 defeats in those games. Yeah, it's a dire run of form at this moment in time, and from what I can see, he's running out of answers and possible solutions on the football pitch to change our fortunes round. And I think there's a lot of different points that can be gone into, which we will in this podcast, from defensive frailties to wrong personnel selection in the final third of the pitch, and even questions further down and further into the boardroom about, has he actually been properly backed in this January transfer window just gone.
Of course, we'll, as you say, kind of delve into everything. And I think this podcast, we obviously spoke to each other at the match, but even since kind of coming out the ground, we both kind of agreed that this podcast is probably going to be more so a where are we at podcast, rather than kind of going through the Sheffield United and Watford games and picking out moments and things which could have changed, or analysing how we could have defended better. The bottom line is, as I've said, we're 4 defeats on the bounce. We're down to 11th in the table, and it's 2 more defeats from where we were last week. I'm going to pre-warn everyone, it's probably not going to be the most light-hearted listening, but I think we've got to start with Sheffield United, obviously, Nathan. In terms of the game, obviously there was a couple of changes off the back of Sunderland. Ilin Jr. and Kelechi Iheanacho both come in for their full debuts. Obviously, Iheanacho making his debut for Force and Whittaker. At the time, seemed like probably the right thing to do. I must admit, obviously we weren't 100% aware where Conway's fitness was. And Illing Jr. impressed off the bench in a limited kind of cameo, more so than what Morgan Whittaker managed against Sunderland, obviously with more time on the pitch. I think Wednesday night was, for me, I just said it a little bit earlier, when apathy really started to kick in the sense of, largely under Michael Carrick, the frustration for me this season has been, we have had long stretches in games and moments and chances in games where we have been our worst enemy. Early on this season, we were struggling to put chances away. It's been a constant throughout the season that we've made individual errors. That hasn't really ever changed. But for the most part, we've largely always had at least one big spell. Even against Sunderland, I thought the performance was pretty good, to be honest. Preston second half for probably about 30 minutes. We absolutely dominated. We were hammering on the door and didn't manage to obviously find the lead. Sheffield United was the first game in a while where I just thought the performance was embarrassing. It was pathetic. It lacked energy, it lacked attacking intent, it lacked any kind of level of defending. It was as bad And look, Sheffield United are a good team, obviously, but we've beaten them this season. We've beaten them at the Riverside. They're not the Galacticos. We were just appalling on the night.
Yeah, as you say, it's one where I think had we gone into Sheffield United away off the back of a win, you could sort of take as a fan that you'd go there and get a chasing, but you've just had 9 days off after Sunderland to regroup, to reform some ideas and change things round, possibly alter a formation or a setup defensively to negate some of the defensive errors, and they were still so apparent, cut through like a knife through butter on a number of occasions, which is just truly embarrassing to watch. But yeah, the players that came in, Illing Jr. and Iheanacho, both looked off it. Illing Jr. was as poor as Engel at Sheffield Wednesday last season, as poor as the debut of as I've seen since then. Which, I mean, to even say that in the same sentence as Engel shows how poor it was. And Iheanacho simply looks unfit and not up to anywhere near the match sharpness that should be expected of a player playing in the championship. And look, I don't want to blame him because he hasn't played pretty much any football since the start of the season. But yeah, you're really struggling if he's your option to start the game on Wednesday night. As mentioned, defensively, all over the place, all of the goals really. You can pick out all the goals. We're not going to do it because we just feel like we're wasting our breath.
It,
But
it does it does feel like that, doesn't it?
but yeah, we're just getting cut through constantly for the first goal and the second goal, and then a defensive error from Mark Travers for the third goal, in which he should simply claim the ball. But to go to Sheffield United and get beat, it's not a disgrace. One team's been there and beat them this year, but you're just hoping that you'd be in the game a lot more than we were. And look, we scored a penalty, which it's very dubious for it to be a penalty in the first place. And really, from everything that I saw watching the game on Wednesday night, we had a penalty and a Hayden Hackney shot in the first half and nothing else
Yeah, yeah.
for the full 90 minutes.
As you say, I've got no problem with getting beat. I really don't. And as much as it's frustrating, and there's been a lot of kind of comments thrown at Michael Carrick that, his team aren't streetwise, his team don't have leaders, they play lovely football on the eye for large periods of games and then have lapses in concentrations. That performance was just bad. And to come back to your point, I don't mind getting beat, but there's a way of getting beat. And that way, that the type of performance that you saw on Wednesday night smacked to me of, as I say, that's at full time, that's when kind of apathy set in. And I almost felt that, look, we've got Watford on Saturday. If you can't muster up a win and even scrape a win, I was hoping more so for a performance more than anything today, because I thought you need to just instill a little bit of confidence back into the supporters that this team has enough within them that they can, and let's be brutally honest, scrape into the playoffs. And the expectations have fallen from automatic promotion is a realistic kind of aim. Then it was, well, if we can get the top four and kind of be within that pack. Then it was, well, we'll just cement ourselves in fifth and sixth. We've spoken about it numerous times, how bad this league is. And now genuinely it feels like if we can scrape somehow into the playoffs, it would seem like, at this point in the season, it would seem like an unbelievable success, because what we're seeing from Wednesday, what we've seen from today, is just so far off a team. And even if they did get in the playoffs, I'd hate to think what some of the teams, the Burnleys, Sunderlands, even Blackburn, would do to us right now, because we're a mess, to be totally honest. Just in terms of some kind of individual comments that were made from Chris Wilder, which I thought were really interesting in the build-up to the game. He said pre-match, "I'd rather have a team that's mentally strong and tough and wants to win than a team that's milky and soft and plays beautiful football." As much as I hate to say it, Chris Wilder, I'm on board with you, because without saying it directly, he summed up exactly what we've been for the most part this season. And it seems strange to say this, but you didn't even get the fluffy, milky football nice on the eye on Wednesday night. It was just, well, for want of the better word, absolutely shite, really. Yeah, it was pathetic. It was completely pathetic. But I think, to be honest, and given we're so fresh from today, Sheffield United was already gone. You know, it would have been no disgrace had we have gone there in good form and gotten beat. Today was really where it was at. Today was really what felt like, I don't want to say last chance saloon for Michael Carrick, but it felt like at home, your supporters are there, your home fans, your season ticket holders are there to basically be shown that this team is still capable of getting in the playoffs, and that this manager is capable of getting the best out of the players at his disposal. And I think first thing, the biggest headline before a ball was kicked, the team selection. It smacked of Chris Wilder at Coventry a few days before he was sacked, taking Giles and Jones out the team, I think, that day, and taking a few other sort of notable players out of the team. I mean, if you want to just run through the changes, it was a similar situation to that of when Bergzorg randomly come into the team against Luton. And you said, well, I hope this goes similarly to how it did when you rang me and said, why is Bergzorg in the team pre-Luton? That went quite well. Today, it was just polar opposites, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. Strange selection, really. Borges in for Giles. Can't really fault that one.
No.
Obviously, you mentioned about Dale Fry not being in the squad, so Edmondson retained his place alongside Rav Vandenberg. In central midfield, a little bit of a change of shape. Azaz finally dropped out the team after being poor for the best part of 3 months now, and Barlasser came into the side. Now, I thought that this would be the change in midweek when I thought about the team for Saturday. I thought that he would go with a midfield three. What we did see in terms of shaping the game, we'll get into, but it wasn't what we thought. The next change, Illing Jr. out for Whittaker. Didn't necessarily mind that. Thought it was strange that Whittaker didn't start the game on Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
And Tommy Conway into the team, but not for Kelechi Iheanacho, for our best player for the
A
last
month
three
now.
weeks. Yeah, the last 3 weeks to a month, Delano Bergzorg. And looking at that, you've got two strikers on the pitch, three midfielders, a winger who can play in the 10. And you're looking at it thinking, well, has he gone 4-3-3 like we thought he possibly would, that we did see in the second half at Bramall Lane on Wednesday night?
And
And
I must say, we marginally, very, very marginally improved when Dan Barlaser come on the pitch. So I actually felt in that sense, I mean, the Bergsorg thing is another issue, but I actually felt at least he's trying something slightly different.
but as mentioned, we get into the game and it's not 4-3-3. Tommy Conway is not playing left wing like me and you sort of were like, well, is he going to play left wing? It was Hayden Hackney playing left wing and Tommy Conway and Kelechi Iheanacho playing as, well, two centre forwards, really. I thought that you'd perhaps see one of them more withdrawn than the other. And okay, Iheanacho drifted towards the right hand side and wasn't on the last line as much, but I wouldn't say he was a 10.
No,
Tommy,
to be honest, Nathan, I don't really know what he was.
no.
What I would love to see today is running stats, because as I've mentioned, as you've mentioned, even on Wednesday night he looked unfit. Today, I, I must say and again, I don't want to come across reactionary by any measure. I actually was intrigued by this loan signing of Kelechi Iheanacho. we sold Emmanuel Latilaf a real hard worker, and his attitude was questioned. But one thing that you get from Emmanuel Latilaf, even when he's not scoring, is he will press, 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 and press up until basically he can't even move anymore. Kelechi Iheanacho is so far away from that type of player. It couldn't be more different. He today, well, he just looks unfit. He looks, I've seen a few people say, you could argue slightly disrespectful. I think, honestly, there's probably some truth in it. He looks overweight. Now people are saying, and understandably, I get the sentiment. Now people are saying he just smacks of a panic signing. And I don't think that's the way in which I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because of kind of the larger examples of what we've seen from this recruitment team. I said in the last podcast that this will go one of either two ways. It'll be an absolute horror show or it'll be a masterstroke. Judging from 2 games, and admittedly that's only a very short spell, it looks like a bit of a disaster already. He's so far away from everything that this recruitment team's been good at. Yeah, I'm a little bit lost for words at his performance today. Not his performance, just his general kind of lack of anything in his performance.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of touches from him that were okay, in which he brought the ball down from the heavens on one touch, but yeah, not a whole lot from Iheanacho at all today. But the whole sort of setup was just baffling, really. I mean, as mentioned, you've got your two forward players, Conway and Iheanacho, Hayden Hackney playing off the left. But when we were pressing, Conway and Iheanacho pressed either side. Hackney pressed through the middle, leaving Andrews, their right fullback, open constantly. And Aidan Morris was the one to jump, leaving Dan Barlaser in the middle of the pitch. And look, I actually thought that we started the game pretty okay, but as soon as Watford gained a foothold in the game and understood what was happening, we just began to be a little bit jittery, playing out from the back and balls just going astray. You can tell that the players aren't confident in doing it. Ayling knocking a couple of balls into the middle of the pitch. Edmondson again, the same like we saw on Wednesday night. And I'm looking at it on about minute 20, and the crowd are a little bit on edge as expected. We're in a horrific run of form, and we need a result. We're desperate for a result, and we're playing out from the back. And Barlasser has turned facing the defenders, telling them to calm down. How about don't calm down, play with some urgency, play with some intensity, try and get on the front foot and try and score a couple of goals to win this game, because we need a result. It is not going to be another case of being slow, methodical, and just passive, waiting for a team to just let us through. It doesn't happen in any division, never mind the Championship. And Watford, in a similar position to us today, have come to the Riverside and dug in, completely dug in, took the one opportunity that they had in the first half with the set piece. Great delivery into the box. Sissoko comes in, powers through, buries it in at the back of the net, and for the rest of the game, I mean, we can talk about the second half in detail if you want, but for the
There's
rest,
not that much to go into detail
there's,
with, to be
there's
fair.
exactly there's not that much to go into detail with, and the things that we can go into detail with are that they played on the counter attack and they created the better chances in the second half, with Chakvetadze having 2 efforts saved by Travers. But apart from that, we mustered maybe 2 efforts
Yeah,
in that second half. When
yeah.
Bergzorg came on, our best player for the best part of a month, came onto the pitch, and okay, at times his decision making's a little bit poor, but he's the only player there today that came on in the second half and had 2 efforts that forced the keeper to make a save in a game where we are deathly struggling, deathly struggling, and need a result. And he's the only player that is getting shots off, testing the goalkeeper, and making the opposition work. And look, I appreciate that he tried to change things at half time. After going 1-0 down in the first half, he's brought Berg's on and changed shape once again. But again, we reverted back to our usual shape and we were wide open, which I guess you're going to be chasing the game at home against a side which, look, they've got some good players that can attack you and can hurt you, and that provide you a little bit of pace on the counter attack. And I understand that we can be open, but my overall sort of frustration from today, especially, which has built up over the last, well, months now, is that unfortunately throwing attackers on is just not the answer. Throwing attackers on in order to replace Iheanacho or Whittaker isn't the answer. And the overall frustration at the end of the game is, without creating a whole lot in the second half, we're in 4 minutes of stoppage time. And I think the game ended with us in possession of the ball in our own half of the pitch without pumping it forward. And I'm looking at the players thinking, why, oh, why would you not send either Edmondson or Vandenberg
It's
up
it's
to...
it's desperation, isn't
It's
it?
basics. It's basics, though, Chris. It is basics. Every football team, when they're chasing a game and it gets to stoppage time, hoys the centre back up front and starts playing diagonals and trying to win second balls. And we are still sat in our own half of the pitch, just passing it from Vandenberg to Edmondson. It is truly, truly futile stuff. It looks like, unfortunately, we're out of ideas.
I completely agree. And look, it gets to something where, like you say, I don't kind of think of ourselves as, like, we're not old enough to be dinosaurs and say, just lump it up the pitch. I don't want us to do that from minute one, but sometimes, and going back to Wilder's comments, it's a little bit where, like, pragmatism comes into things. It's a sense of, this is not working. There needs to be noticeable shift in the way that we're playing, going a little bit more direct, going a little bit longer to basically just get the ball in the right areas. And it's not us just saying lump it forward and hope for the best, but it did feel that desperate today. And it goes back to be honest, you mentioned the atmosphere. It felt from minute one today that the atmosphere was nervy. The atmosphere, there was Michael Carrick described it as a smell in the air in his BBC T's interview. Look, I don't think it was quite a smell, but you could certainly, I know exactly what he means, in the sense of going into today felt like a huge, huge occasion for Middlesbrough. And I hate to over-egg things, because if I'm completely honest, I would still probably be I'm not saying that I don't think it would be the right decision or anything like that, but I would still be quite shocked if Michael Carrick doesn't lead the team for the Bristol game. But it felt like, you're at home, you need to basically impose some kind of belief or change of what we've seen up until this point. A lot of the questions in the media this week towards Michael Carrick were, and credit to the press, in fairness, because usually, typically he's given I don't want to say an easy ride, but no one's ever really turned the screw and kind of put it back on him and said, look, like, we've been doing the same things now for, well, all season, and you say we need to improve. What do we need to improve? What do you plan on improving? How do we go about seeing a noticeable change in mentality, in the makeup of this team, in eradicating all of these individual errors? And we were hoping for some of those questions to be answered via the performance today. I think what ultimately Michael Carrick has done is tried to basically stamp his kind of mark on the game by making such drastic changes, dropping Bergzorg, taking Giles out the team, and ultimately, well, it's completely backfired. And it feels now especially given the boos at half time, at full time. It just felt a little bit for me today that the first point really in the season where I actually felt that, do you know what, we're not actually going to make the playoffs here. If this continues, we are on current trajectory, on form, on results. It's not a feeling. There's results to back this up now. I genuinely thought, should this continue for not even a significant amount of time longer, but a few more, another month, then we're going to give ourselves basically the impossible task of playing the kind of chasing a pack of teams who, let's be honest, they're not good. They're not good teams. We've spent an awful lot of money, whether that's been spent correctly or not, and in the correct areas, we'll get onto that. But this group of players, this squad, whether it is a little bit lopsided, yeah, it is completely lopsided in the sense of the attacking numbers that we have. But this team has more than enough quality this season to get into the Championship playoffs. And at the moment, it's going to fail to do that. In terms of numbers, 1 win in the last 6 league games, 5 defeats, 3 wins in 14 league games. We're now closer to the bottom 3 than to Sunderland, who were in 4th, 15 points off Derby and 18 points off Sunderland. And I would just like to make the point, as I have done, it feels like expectations have almost gone incrementally down to the point where now, I go back to desperation in terms of the performance. I feel like it's now desperation, panic stations a little bit in terms of the season, because we've seen investment, but this squad of players, had it have not even necessarily changed, if we'd have just gone, kept everything the same but Iheanacho for Latilaf, I would have still been fairly confident that it would have been good enough to get in the playoffs. Now, there's been more change than that. We've seen little to no improvement. In reality, we've got worse. So where do we go from here, really, Nathan?
Yeah, those are the questions that need answering. And I honestly, I mean, obviously, I don't know the answers, but we've gone into January and our points at the start of the window were that we needed another right back, another centre half, because we'd heard murmurs of Matt Clark leaving the football club. And having watched Borough side without Aidan Morrison for 2 months, we said that we needed a central midfielder. And instead, we didn't get a right back. We got George Edmondson on a permanent deal. Okay. That's okay, I suppose, because he's already here. But you needed to sign someone else to replace Matt Clark. You need 4 centre halves. We didn't get a central midfielder. There was obviously the bid for Morton on deadline day. Too little, too late. And then other players that have come in the door, obviously the Lath one out the door, which I'll get onto a separate point about Lath in a moment. But Iheanacho coming in as a replacement, we earmarked concerns, as you said. It's either going to be one extreme or the other, and at the minute it's leaning towards a poor extreme. And then in regards to attacking players, Morgan Whittaker signed on a permanent deal. Okay, by all means, he had a really good season last year, which I actually was sort of concerned about this signing as soon as I heard of it, really. A player last year that scored 19 goals for Plymouth Argyle, in which most of them he'd just spank a shot from 25 yards in the top corner. I'm not massive on expected goals, and I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I know he significantly overperformed his expected goal metric last season. And Samuel Ealing Jr., you have a player that is on loan from a top sort of 6 team in England with a lot of promise, but he even said in his signing interview for Middlesbrough, he doesn't know what his best position is. So what chance have you got? You played him on the right wing when he's played as a left wing back in a back five. So what? Doesn't make any sense at all. If he's not a winger and he's not a fullback, we don't play wing
Yeah,
backs.
yeah. Just based off, if you just look at the numbers for all of Samuel Illing Jr.'s performances throughout his career, the one position he's played the least amount of football in is off the right, and we've been using him there. And look, I'm not making excuses because it was a dreadful performance. He didn't do a lot today when he was used, you could argue, in his more natural position off the left. But as you say, even with the Whittaker one, and admittedly so, you can rewind the tapes, and me and you were also excited. It's an exciting signing with one eye on as well, and I must say, with one eye on Ben Doak not being our player next season, and that's understandable. But even then, it still feels like with the Morgan Whittaker signing, the first thing when you sent me that message from Alan Nixon, ironically enough, was that I responded was, do we need him? Where does he really fit in amongst? Obviously, this was before Ben Doak picked up his injury, but it did seem a bit of a bizarre fit, didn't it? Really?
Yeah, and look, as well, just to make a sort of separate point, right wingers at Middlesbrough Football Club, which they evidently think are right wingers. Ben Doak, Morgan Whittaker, Samuel Lilling Jr., Marcus Force. Why have we got four right wingers? Riddle me that.
It feels a little bit like square pegs in round holes. If Middlesbrough wanted, and I think the biggest frustration for me is the fact that Michael Carrick has absolutely, by all accounts, jumped through hoops to bring Ryan Giles back to the football club. It's ultimately his signing, and it's the first one really, other than Edmondson, to be fair, where it's been made quite apparent. And obviously, you can read into why it was made so apparent that Michael Carrick was desperate to bring Ryan Giles back into the football club. Now, Illing Jr., if you're going to play him off the left, is a winger that likes to be wide and put crosses into the box. Ryan Giles is a fullback who we were all aware, we know what Ryan Giles is about, likes to be wide and put crosses into the box. So if the plan was to use Illing Jr. off the left, then that doesn't really make too much sense to begin with, because Ryan Giles and him, that dynamic doesn't really work. It feels like this transfer window, as much as, and I think we do need to get on to like just Carrick in general and where we're at with that, but it does feel like it's not solely, at least the recent kind of surge in negativity, it's not solely just down to Michael Carrick and the performances, because I do feel like now Michael Carrick's dealing with something which is very much lopsided. Perhaps not numerically, but in terms of profiles within the squad, it's probably, there was always a question of, does Michael Carrick know his best 11? And it's just added further question marks to that. That's the last thing we really needed. And we ultimately haven't addressed the main issues that we had. And obviously one of the main issues, I know this is a point that you want to make, is just the fact that on the topic of Carrick and what he's had to deal with, he's ultimately lost one of his best players in every single transfer window, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly my point. From the moment he came to the football club, he had okay. We'll sort of ignore first January window. Whether you agree, which look, me and you have been on here for a number of years now, and when these deals have came up, we've sort of supported those deals, which at the time, those those are right. Like the fees that we received for these players, we believe, both me and yourself, that they were good deals for the football club at that time in circumstances.
If I was to play devil's advocate, I'd say in terms of the Carrick topic, would Emmanuel Latilaf, and I think you could argue either way, but would it have been as cut and dried of Emmanuel Latilaf leaving Middlesbrough Football Club had we have been where Sunderland are in the league right now? I'm not so sure.
Probably not. No. And look, that lands on the first half of this season. It had to have been better, and it wasn't. There was plenty of games in which we have seen an all too familiar story that is still leading to now, and we are still seeing now, which is unacceptable. The fact that we're two-thirds into the season now, and we're still seeing the same games happening over and over again. Look, I put out a tweet yesterday hoping for backing from the fans today in the hope that we'd see a real positive performance. And I was met with responses saying, well, they have been backed. And to which I would agree. I've been in away ends this season with 5,000 travelling Borough fans in which the performance on the pitch on the day has left me going home unhappy and sort of frustrated at what I'd just seen, in which we know that these players are good players. We've seen them perform to a level that is top six in the championship. And the fact that that is so inconsistent, I don't want to say that it can just be down to them. It has to lie at the manager's door in the way that he's setting up this team. And Wednesday night, although, as we mentioned, Sheffield United, difficult place to go, it's all too familiar that this team is constantly open, constantly too easy to just get through. And yeah, we're not creating anywhere near as many chances as we were early on in the season. And now we're giving more away at the back end. And as mentioned, we're looking at a manager at the moment that is struggling to find the answers. And we've seen and heard, and there's fans that will listen to this podcast that have listened to Carrick's post match after today against Watford, and he looks like a desperate man. It's the setup. You have to change something, and I
You've
understand he did. I understand he did today, but I'm at a loss, really, Chris, if I'm honest.
yeah. I think what would be my main takeaway, and I think, look, this is perhaps the wrong way to think about it. This is kind of where I'm at right now. I love Michael Carrick as a person. I don't even know him, but I love it's an easy stick to beat him with, and I've done exactly that at times this season. That, his not too high, not too low attitude. When you're winning, it's the best thing in the world because you think, well, the players aren't getting over the top. They're still doing their jobs. And that's the example set by the manager. When you're getting beat every week and when you're going through a run of form like we are at the moment, then you say, well, they need a rocket up their arse. They need to be screamed at. They need water bottles being booted about in the changing rooms. I think there's got to be a happy medium. And Carrick doesn't really kind of give you that. I don't feel. I think in terms of, and I don't want to base this podcast around that Chris Wilder comment, but I listened to Scott and Dom this week on the You Are My Borough podcast, and one of the questions basically was, if Chris Wilder had this team this season, would they be doing much better than what they would under Michael Carrick's management, being the head coach, whatever you want to call it? And it made me think, yes, of course they'd be doing better, because he would find answers. He would be pragmatic enough to change. And I'm not talking about doing a Neil Warnock and sort of not really having the principles or no identity to the point where you go into games and you're thinking what are we actually trying to do here? But how many times this season have we seen Michael Carrick, or in fact, scratch that, not even this season, throughout his full tenure, other than, the real honeymoon period, how many times have we seen a tactical tweak other than when we were potentially going to go down last season and move to a back five? How many times have we seen him go, for this specific game or this run of games, I need to make a significant change in terms of formation, tactics, adding an extra body to the midfield, playing a left back purely because of the fixture. that won't bomb on and will just do his job, you can probably count on one hand, really. And I heard him say this week, I think it's a little bit unfair. We approach every game completely differently. We do different things, and it might not be easy to see on the eye, but we don't just copy and paste each week. I'd have to disagree, because look, I'm not claiming that I'm some sort of football expert and some tactical genius, but I'm not kind of that away with the fairies to think that largely, if you want to put it to a percentage, 85% of Middlesbrough downfall this season have been through the exact same things, and it's not changing anytime soon, and it's getting worse. And just my sort of concluding point would be, Michael Carrick said a few weeks back, I want to play winning football, not pretty football. I want to play winning football. Being pragmatic is one of the biggest ways to do that, and I just don't think he's got the adaptability to do that, really. And if I'm honest, given I hated being in the stadium today, it was from minute one, it was not a nice atmosphere, but I just feel like this season is just going to go out with a whimper if we try and continue with this. And I'll back him. Absolutely, I will. We'll go to Bristol City on Friday, and we'll probably get beat, because we always do there. Nothing to do with Carrick. It's just one of those things that's written in the script at the start of every season. But I just feel that this group of players is a lot better than what they're showing currently. And I feel like we've become stagnant. And I just feel that ultimately, obviously, if the decision was made, then we'd have a podcast to discuss ultimately the reasons why it did go the way it did, and alternatives, things like that. I don't want to get drawn too much into that, but I just feel like at this current moment, if I'm Steve Gibson or Kieran Scott sat there tonight, I'm thinking, from what I've witnessed inside the stadium today, atmosphere, performance, looking at the league table, is this going to improve? Do we stand a chance of making the playoffs? And for me, as soon as that thought of, yeah, we'll still make the playoffs, when it was kind of just that can't happen. That can't be allowed to happen. Then there needs to be action, really.
Yeah, you said there that we've become stagnant. I actually disagree. I think that we're going backwards.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'd take that back. I'd delete that from what I've just said. And yeah, we're regressing. We're not stagnant. We're regressing.
Yeah, and look, as you say there, the boos at half time, the boos at full time, they tell a picture of the fans' frustration that has been pent up in me and yourself for a couple of months, and I think it's culminated in this week. I mean, you, to be fair, went with it last week with the Sunderland game and said that he's under pressure, and now another two defeats to add to the tally. Teams are gaining ground on us. Teams have leapfrogged us in the division. We're now down to 11th place in the division. We're being caught up by the true dross of the division. And look, we're a couple of points away from 15th. I'll leave that as a thought, because for a team which has previously promised so much more, to be falling down the table at such an alarming rate is unacceptable. And there's plenty of places where you can look at and see that changes possibly need to be made. But obviously, the main one, which will always be looked at, is the manager. And as I've said throughout the podcast, he's struggling to find the answers at this moment in time. And the full-time picture that you saw at the Riverside today with the booze, those sort of events are difficult to come back from. And that's my fear for
Yeah,
Michael Carrick and Borough. But look, we're in a position where I think that he is really, really on thin ice. And Steve Gibson has pulled the trigger in the past for less runs of form than this. And look, I'll back him. I always have done. I've been a massive fan of Michael Carrick since he came in the door for what he's done over the past 2.5, 3 seasons now. I felt that in the summer when he signed his new contract that was the biggest signing that we could have made in the summer. But now he is on the verge of losing his job. But this is the biggest, this is bigger than last season. This is the biggest period in his managerial career so far by an absolute country mile. He is right under the cosh. And look, I'm already thinking about if we get past Monday, I think that he's in a job for Friday. And the hope for me is we need now. It's been said on this podcast by me and yourself for weeks and months now that we need to see a reaction. It is getting to the point where the players have to start shouldering some burden, or else they are gonna or play a part, sorry, in losing the manager in which they all signed for. They're gonna lose his job, and yeah, it'll be a real sorry state of affairs for probably my favourite manager that I've had in my lifetime so far watching the football club. He certainly produced the best football that I've seen as a match going fan in my lifetime. And the unfortunate thing is it's been just too inconsistent.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. And I said earlier, it's perhaps not the right way to like act, and no one's got any given right to say ultimately like we're just two fans, and of course we've got opinions that people probably listen to this. People probably don't listen because they've listened to a few and think they just speak absolute nonsense. But as you say, sometimes as much as what you watch on the pitch, sometimes you kind of look at the managers off the pitch as well, the way that they carry themselves in terms of as a person, as an example. You couldn't really pick a better manager than Michael Carrick, but I think it comes down to the fact, as I say, ultimately I worry now that Michael Carrick and this group of players have got into a position where they may not even achieve. I mean, at this rate, they may not even achieve a top half finish. If you'd said to me at the beginning of the season, on the 15th of February, you'll sit 11th in the table, 4 points off the playoffs, I would have said, well, I guess Michael Carrick won't be in a job then. Someone else must be taking the team. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add. Obviously, as I say, we're recording this on Saturday night. I really don't think, to be honest, although he's on very, very thin ice, I don't think that the club will act. I think Bristol City will be his last chance. So if you are listening to this, obviously it's probably the case that, Michael Carrick's still Middlesbrough head coach going into Friday. I mean, if things change, we'd probably need to record a fresh one. So maybe no one will ever hear this. Yeah, is there anything that you want to finish up on at all, Nathan?
Not really. No, I think we've discussed pretty much all of our thoughts and feelings on the last week, the pressure that he's under, the pressure that he has been under and that he's under now, the frailties of the defence, the frailties of the squad, and ultimately the frailties of this manager's setup currently. So yeah, we'll wait and see what the future holds, but I'm not full of hope going to Ashton Gate and watching from the TV, which is
The
set in the
International
International
Space
Space
Station.
Station.
Well, at least we've got one laugh out of this podcast, Nathan. It's always nice to finish on a bit of a giggle. But yeah, as you say, we'll keep an eye out. Who knows what the next kind of 48, 72 hours may hold for Middlesbrough Football Club. Thank you ever so much for watching and tuning in. As always, if you have liked the video version of this podcast, then of course you can subscribe and like the video, and please do leave a comment on the YouTube. And also, obviously, audio listeners, in terms of your favorite podcast providers, you can, of course, give us a 5-star rating and review. But yeah, that's the state of play as things currently stand. So as always, thank you ever so much for watching, and that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.